So just to go over the purpose and the outcomes of this meeting, we're really seeing this as kind of a meet and greet for members of the frontline advice community to learn more about what support student pro bono volunteers can offer their organizations, as well as what offering student pro bono placements would entail. So whether that looks at training, supervision, hosting costs, all of that. And we really hope that you'll leave here today with an understanding of what's needed in terms of support, as well as what the barriers are when it comes to using student pro bono offerings. So we're facilitating the session today to share an opportunity to develop and utilize the student pro bono work that the University of Law have been promoting. We're really seeing this as an initial event to learn more about the topic and a chance to ask questions and get some answers, as well as an opportunity to give us some feedback. So particularly if there's any ongoing work that you'd like us to support or facilitate, we'd really like to hear from you during as well as after the event. So without further ado, we'll move on to our first presenter. I'm really pleased to welcome Tim Carter, who is the pro bono coordinator at the University of Law, and who's joining us today to give us an overview of the types of tasks student pro bono can contribute to, the different roles and activities student pro bono can support, and the support University of Law can offer in terms of placing and supporting student volunteers. So Tim, thank you so much for joining us today.
Emmeline, thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. Hello, everybody. It's a good number of people joining us, so I'll try and cover everything for everybody, but very unlikely to be able to. So question and answer session at the end. If there's anything that I haven't covered or anything you want to discuss in a bit more detail, please do write your questions down and have those ready for me at the end. Right, anybody put your hand up if you can't. So first slide, who am I? My name's Tim Carter. I am the pro bono coordinator for University of Law, Bloomsbury, Moorgate and Norwich campuses. This slide shows employability set for success because when I normally give talks, I'm giving it in the capacity of a member of the university's employability team, and my main function is to make sure when the students leave the university that they are ready for work and that they have something to differentiate themselves when it comes to interview and their CV. Now, you may have questions for me at the end, or you may have questions that you want to think about and come back to me later on. So my contact details are here. I've put them in the chat as well. So have a look there and do feel free to contact me. Emmeline had sort of rather stolen my thunder for the first few slides because I was just going to summarize what the purpose of the meeting was, a meet and greet for frontline members of the frontline community to understand, first of all, what the University of Law does, and secondly, how it can support your organisation. So I'll just rattle through that. The important thing is the outcomes, I think, is to make sure that we have an understanding of what the support is available, what the barriers that you're probably going to experience in being able to use student volunteers. A little bit about the university. We are the largest specialist provider of legal education. We've got 12 campuses in the UK. We've got international campuses. Each campus has somebody rather like me, a pro bono coordinator. I don't really have a job description. I've got something of a roving role, and I like to think of that as just providing commercial awareness training to the students to make them more marketable when they come to getting their jobs. We've got 14,000 students, most of them law, some of them policing, business and criminology. These are more recent additions to the portfolio of the university's activities, but a huge number of students. And I think that's one of the, from a pro bono perspective, one of the more challenging aspects of my job, but also one of the biggest selling points. Most of our students come from a legal background. They're either doing an LLB, undergraduates misspelt there, sorry about that, but we also got postgraduate, and these follow both the pathways for training to be a solicitor and a barrister. As I said, I'm responsible for Bloomsbury and Moorgate. I've got 6,000 of those students. They're all London based, and so if you're London based, I appreciate the wonders of Zoom, that people can join from anywhere. We have a strong contingent of students who are available in central London, but also a number spread across the country. Now, the agenda, I'll just go rattle over that because it's something that Emmeline had talked to you about. And anything that I say really has to be judged in the context of what the other speakers are going to be saying. I'm talking about really what the university can offer, but the other organisations who are contributing will be looking at it from the advice provider's perspective, and perhaps you'll see some dovetailing between what can be provided and what the experience of organisations who use volunteer advice have learned. So the the thrust of this is, as Martha had said, is to balance the availability of volunteers against what is an inevitable cost of time, training and supervision and other resources to make volunteers useful. There's really no point in having volunteers joining your organisation if it's actually just more trouble than it's worth. So the university has a very large and well-developed, very mature pro bono offering. I don't think it's any secret to say that the university does this to promote its commercial activities. The incidental benefit is to the advice sector and also to the community at large, but really we want our students to be as polished and rounded as possible when it comes to entering the labour market. But there are some things that we can't do. We're restricted by the scope of reserved legal activities and the claims management regulations. We can only do things which are permitted by our professional indemnity insurance, and to an extent location affects us. We're not a single campus university, and so we're not restricted in that sense, but our students are obviously geographically located. However, that's been mitigated to some extent by COVID and the rise of remote working and Zoom and the like. So an overview of the type of student tasks that they can contribute to. First thing to look at is what we do internally, and Martha did say don't talk about clinics. I think she was saying don't really talk about our internal clinics, because those aren't really going to be of any direct interest to you, but just helpful to know what we do so that you can get an idea of the experience that we have and what our students and what our administration and organisation can bring to your organisation. As you'd imagine, there's a lot of retail advice that we provide. Examples that I've given: family, small business, consumer, property, housing, employment, wills, trusts, and we're bringing online a mediation clinic shortly, which is really just to recognise the government's intended shift away from voluntary mediation to a more compulsory use of it. But what's probably more important is our external partnerships, something that we're always working to develop. Our clinics have been running internally since 1999, but our external partnerships are more recent. They have been developing over the course of time, and our relationships, I think, have been developing and deepening as time goes on. Common examples, you'll be familiar with the likes of Streetlaw and school presentation projects. There are a lot of these around, and this is an opportunity for our students to get out into the community, to have training, but also give the benefit of their life experience and their academic experience to pass those on to the younger generation. We have run and continue to run help at court schemes, of which many of the organisations represented on this call will be examples. We'll have worked with some of you. I'd love to work with others of you. So the models differ, but the thrust is the same, to make sure that people who turn up to court who don't have adequate representation can receive advice either from somebody who's in court waiting or through the sort of concierge and administrative support from students from a solicitor who's perhaps waiting on the end of a Zoom call. We also work on alongside law firms, from high street to silver circle firms, who have perhaps internal pro bono activities that are already ongoing, and we can transplant our students into those environments and to support them so that the resource that we provide is effectively free, whereas if they had to do that themselves and with you, the cost of actually using people that you employ or having to recruit people to perform these activities can really be prohibitive. We do non-legal activities. Students go into youth clubs, they take on trusteeships. An example, ILBF, International Book Facility, where books are collected, particularly academic books are collected and sent to universities around the world. I know that our Bloomsbury campus works with universities in Mozambique. So the reach of these projects can be international, although I appreciate the thrust of today is national. This is an opportunity for students in non-legal capacity to develop their soft skills. The legal legal clinics and activities that we do are more about developing their hard, specific legal and career-oriented skills. So we already take part in several external clinics over the years. We've worked with various local citizens' advice. We have clinics ongoing with St Michael's Church Drop-In Centre. They do a lot of casework, and appreciate we'll come on to the training that requires for students, which can be quite burdensome. They receive training to be Mackenzie's friends, but because of reserved legal activities, we've got to make sure that students are never actually in an advice role unless they're permitted to do so by the regulations, and that would obviously be within the regulatory framework of the organisations that we partnership with. We're also involved in some policy work. For instance, I've had a conversation with Martha and Law Works and Advocate about trying to drive forward and contribute to the pro bono cost order awareness and gathering of data, because it's an important source of funding for the sector, and we suspect that there is merely the tip of an iceberg, and there's a huge amount of pro bono cost orders which could be pursued. We've worked with other organisations historically on and off, just about to start working with Environmental Law Foundation and Centre for Community Empowerment to help with their particular areas of expertise. And we're also starting to work with the Greater London Authority and their emanations to help with business and advice clinics around the city. So there's quite a variety of work that students do already. We have memberships of various organisations. We're trying to develop a policy and data practice, and I think your umbrella organisations will already be working on that, but the backbone of any new policy is data, and the old adage that if you can't measure it, you're not really going to be able to achieve anything to drive it forward is very important. Just moving on to how we support students. We have professional indemnity insurance for all activities that the students undertake within the university. So it's important to draw the distinction between what the students do in the university and what the students do outside. All of you will, I imagine, carry professional indemnity insurance, so it's important to be clear at the outset that where students do volunteer, we've got to make sure that the adequate insurance is in place. We perform right-to-work checks for all of our students, whether they are involved internally in the university or whether they're seconded or volunteering to external opportunities. We have 20% of our students come from overseas, and so it's doubly important for visa purposes to make sure that they do have right-to-work checks, but you can be sure that when students come to you that they're properly vetted. We don't undertake DBS checks ourselves. That's something that our partners always perform, both because of the logistics of it and also because we don't generally internally work in circumstances where DBS is required. We have a safeguarding obligation for our students, and so regardless of how much involvement we've got in the projects, we'll always be keeping a weather eye on how they're getting on. But I think one of the biggest and most important selling points for University of Law students is that they come with rigorous academic training, and through the pro bono and the employability arm of the university, they have a considerable quantity of practical experience as well. You'll often find that the students who volunteer for external opportunities will try to get as many opportunities as they can, and so usually they'll have had some good experience volunteering in other activities, and so actually they're quite mature. And I suppose that touches on what our students do. Some of them 18 years old, they come to university to start their law degree, their LLB, but we also have a lot of students who have completed their degree, they're in a postgraduate environment, and so they may have had 3, 4, 5 years in education, they may have had many other opportunities for pro bono volunteering, and they're actually quite sophisticated young people with a good understanding from an academic point of view, but also plenty of experience in volunteering, so hopefully easy to train and easy to assimilate into your organisation. We also have quality monitoring to make sure that the experience that the students get is a worthwhile one, because it's designed to further their saleability when they come to the labour market. The university has, I think, probably about 1,300 staff to a ratio of 14,000 students, so it's a very good ratio, but amongst those we have a surprising number of solicitors, barristers, and mediators. And while they work in an academic setting, they're constantly pulled across into the internal pro bono activities we've got, but their expertise also helps the students when they go into external facing roles. We have a pool of volunteer solicitors who we draw on to run our internal clinics, but they have a wealth of experience which can also be brought to bear when it comes to training the students, and also I think providing advice to external clinics if they haven't actually got that legal support themselves. We have wider partnerships where we find that we can bring together external partnerships with other external partners that we work with, as well as the internal resource that we have. Fundraising is an important point. University isn't a charity, it used to be, and so we don't raise funds at the moment, but we're looking to set up a charity. We may find that there are headwinds in raising charitable funds when we're an emanation of a university, which is a commercial organisation. But there's also the aspect of what the students and their wider networks can do in terms of fundraising. So for instance, London Legal Support Trust and the walks, which students regularly participate in, are a very good example of how you can use the student access perhaps to broaden your awareness in your stakeholder groups, and perhaps use them to raise funds. There's no particular restriction on what the students do in their external facing roles, and if you want to use them for some kind of fundraising or grant application roles, then you're more than welcome to. The number of students versus the management cost. Well, we have a very large number of law students, and no one organisation is going to be able to take too many of them, but it does mean that we can provide students to many organisations, but we have to manage against that the management cost and time that you have to contribute as well as we do, and it's always something that we're trying to streamline. Which brings me on to how ULaw can assist with the costs and management resource required to properly utilise student volunteers. Well, we work against a backdrop of inadequate sector funding. I don't think anybody is going to put their hand up and say that they have adequate funding. We're always scrabbling around trying to leverage our existing resources, be imaginative in using what we have, and I think what the university brings is an opportunity to provide cooperation between agencies. Students are a rough and unpolished resource, and we have to think about how they can be properly used in a way that actually brings some value to advice and external organisations in the sector. And it's something that all universities struggle with. Some organisations and some universities have come to the conclusion that actually there has to be a payment for the students' time. It's not something that the University of Law has considered at present because we haven't found it necessary, but I suspect this may be the direction of travel. Good planning of projects is important because the danger is that we often find that we will receive a request for student support and it'll be fairly last minute, and we'll perhaps put an advert up on our internal portal. We might need 20 students who need to go and work for an organisation, and our 20 students will duly sign up and they'll go and have some training from the external organisation. But the feedback is that perhaps if there had been a slightly longer run-in period, we might have been able to structure some training for them before the sign-up process. We run those training for our internal functions, and I don't see there's any reason why, with adequate communication before the projects are set up and the volunteers are recruited, that we couldn't lighten your load by being able to provide our students with a bit of earlier training and to acclimatise them so that it's not such a culture shock when they arrive with you. The university has enormous resources with a large number of staff, a large number of students, with 12 campuses around the country, and all of the expertise and the know-how that goes with that. So I think if you are looking for the raw resource of students, some organisations have already concluded that first year LLB students are of no interest to them because they're too young, they're too immature, and perhaps not quite as reliable as they should be. Quite a lot of demand for third year LLBs, where it starts to clash with their exams, and obviously for MA and postgraduate students who are much more sophisticated and have had more exposure. But I think really the important thrust here of how the university can support you and what we can do is early communication, using the resources that we have in the most efficient way to leverage a better result, and a bit more planning in what we can do. Numbers of students are never a problem because we have almost a limitless number. The advent of Zoom and the like means that a lot of your projects will be done remotely, and so that means that we can use students from any location. I think another thing to think about is that it comes back to this early involvement of the University of Law. When it comes to applications for grants, you may well say, well, we're thinking of running this service. We're going to have to bring in volunteers in order to make that service work, and that's going to be part of your tender. Increasingly, I have been asked to get involved in the pre-tender stage and try and hammer down exactly what it is that the University of Law is going to be contributing to the tender, rather than bringing us in after the event, because it may be that there are things that we can contribute to the tender which will be attractive to the organisation which is providing the grant, and maybe it'll just give you a better idea to start thinking earlier about what the involvement is. So it comes back to this point about students being recruited and arriving at their place of volunteering at relatively short notice. So those are the points it's going to cover. We've come in for 7 seconds over time, so hopefully I'm not going to run on. I had put a slide in for questions and answers, but I'll leave that to the end unless, Emmeline, anybody wants to ask me any questions now.
Thank you so much, Tim. I think if it's all right with you, we'll just get our next presenters in, and then we'll have time for some questions at the end. But thank you so much for speaking with us. That was really interesting, and I definitely learned a lot about the kinds of opportunities that you can have students involved in. So, it's great to hear about these opportunities. We also know, as you touched on, that frontline organizations are time and resource poor, and supporting volunteering of any kind can be time consuming. So this next section is going to highlight what models are in use and how frontline organizations are making use of student pro bono volunteering, as well as what resources are required to make pro bono successful and sustainable. So first up, I'd like to welcome Carrie Thompson, who is the Regional Service Manager from Support Through Court. She'll be speaking on some of the benefits and challenges of the model that they use. Carrie, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Hi, thanks, Emmeline. So Support Through Court developed last year, we expanded our university partnerships. We experienced a cut in our funding, and this was a way that we developed to make things more sustainable. I know from what Tim's just been saying, they've been talking about using students on a smaller scale than what we're using them on. We are having around 75 students per service per induction period. So it is a much larger uptake. So students are involved in all aspects of everything that we do at Support Through Court. So they are providing all the support, attending court, attending remote hearings, and it's been a really good experience for students to get involved with all of this. It has brought so many benefits to the service. So just to highlight, we've been able to increase our capacity to meet the needs of clients in ways that we couldn't do before. We've been able to increase our remote support services so that we've got a much larger geographical coverage for each court and each local service site. So it has got so many benefits to using the students, but the amount of planning and preparation that's had to go into developing these partnerships and ensuring that students are ready to be able to undertake these placements, as beneficial as it's been, it's also put quite a strain on our resources as well. So just to highlight a few of the things that we've had to develop to ensure that the students have got the experience that they need and that it's very beneficial for them as well as for our clients. So firstly, we've had to put a lot into planning and developing the placements with each university partner. Obviously, each university runs in a different way, being able to work out academic dates, exam dates, when we're going to experience shortage of volunteers, and when they're going to be ready to be doing inductions and timetabling. All that's had to be taken into account when we were first developing these partnerships. We've had to invest a great deal of resources into training the students. Training them to get them ready has taken much longer than what we first anticipated when we first set this up. Obviously, because they are supporting clients themselves, we've got to ensure that the quality of the support is there, and that's why we've had to put so much into training. Because of the fact as well that we've been working with such large numbers of students at each site, we've really had to change the way in which we deliver our training. So initially we used to only have inductions of around 20 new volunteers per time. When we're doing it for 75, the delivery models and everything in the way that we train has been very different. So we've had to invest quite a bit of time and resources into developing training, but continually reviewing how we're doing that training and whether it is meeting the needs of the students. Another thing that we've had to invest in is our IT support. We've not only has it took extra capacity from IT to be able to support all of the students, we've also had to invest money into developing the phone systems so that there is enough resource for all of the students that we are accommodating. So that has been one cost, to ensure that all of the facilities are there for all of the remote support that students are providing. We've also, at some of our locations, we've had to increase our service managers' hours, simply to ensure that they're there to be able to provide enough supervision for the students throughout all the hours in which we're operating. So this is obviously another cost that we've experienced, and service managers' time has really changed. Whereas they had additional time to get involved with other projects and other services and networking before, we've had to prioritise getting the students ready to be able to provide the support, and also in supervising the students. We've had to develop supervision models for the students, which can then evaluate and feed back into our university partnerships. But all of that said, it has cost time, it has cost money, but there is so many benefits to having the students actually on site. The geographical coverage, the capacity, and also it brings a very different experience to the volunteer base that we had before. Whereas it was very much focused on core volunteers that would have already had their careers and be retired, we've now got a very nice mix of core volunteers and student volunteers that are all learning from each other and sharing experience. That's everything.
Thank you so much, Carrie. That was great to hear about some of the challenges and the benefits that you've seen in your own model. We're going to move quickly along to our next speaker. So we welcome Megan Buckland, who is a student who has worked with Norfolk Community Law Service, and who will be speaking on their model and share a bit about her experience as a volunteer at NCLS.
Hiya, thank you. So my name is Megan, and I'm a student volunteer for Norfolk Community Law Service. I'm here today just to give you a little bit of information from the perspective of a student taking part in pro bono work at the moment. Firstly, on behalf of Jane Basham, our CEO, I just wanted to share some information on the current partnership between NCLS and UEA Law School. So essentially, it's a partnership for justice. NCLS is Norfolk's leading justice charity and has been providing free legal advice help for over 45 years now. It was started by a group of women solicitors who were concerned that people with no means to pay were denied justice. Its legal services are targeted at those made most vulnerable by society. So we provide free legal advice clinics in general legal matters, employment and discrimination as well. The clinics are provided by around 65 local solicitors on a pro bono basis. And NCLS also employs small teams of specialist advisors and solicitors who provide free legal advice help in debt, welfare benefit appeals, immigration, domestic abuse, and family law. The family law also does include family court support. In 2021 to 2022, NCLS dealt with around 9,000 inquiries and helped around 3,500 clients. As you can imagine, the cost of living crisis has resulted in a huge increase of demand for the help across all of our services. So NCLS's partnership with the UEA, NCLS hosts around 50 law students a year as part of their long-term partnership with UEA. It commenced back in 2011 and has just grown since. The students obviously are provided with the opportunity to work directly with clients, solicitors, and get involved in admin tasks that are associated with undertaking legal work. In some areas, like our family court support and our welfare benefit appeals, students who commit and pick up the law quickly are able to represent and act as Mackenzie friends. The opportunities for the students are vast. Many of the volunteers go on to secure successful training contracts, and some now actually help on the free legal advice clinics as qualified solicitors. It definitely helps build employability skills, and also ensures that students are gaining an understanding of social welfare law and why it's so important. So, a bit more about myself. I'm a third-year law student at the UEA, and I've volunteered for NCLS in the family team since September 2021. NCLS has given me the opportunity to have high levels of client contact and gain a general insight into working in the legal sector. So we complete a range of tasks as students. In the team I work for, we split that up into casework and solicitor support. So casework involves basic admin like booking appointments for clients, making follow-up calls to see how their case is progressing, but also has given me the opportunity to sit down with clients and help them fill in application forms for court, which are all then checked by a solicitor. But it just takes that initial workload off the solicitor, getting the initial information that can be drawn out by a student. And then you've got the solicitor support side, which essentially we will sit in on client appointments, make all notes for solicitors, get that written up onto our casework system. And then if there's any basic follow-up information that the client needs from that appointment, we're then responsible for sending that over as well. So a year into my volunteering, I was actually given the opportunity to attend court with a client to act as a Mackenzie friend. Since then, I've attended court various times for various different clients. As a student, this is a really great opportunity. Firstly, due to the private nature of family hearings, it's not something I'd have been able to just go and sit in on and listen to had I not been with NCLS. And also it builds on so many important skills that firms are looking for when it comes to applying for training contracts or paralegal roles post-studies. In March 2022, I was asked to take up the role of team leader for the team that I work with, the family team, which takes some of the burden off the team coordinators that we have. So team leader means that I'm creating rotas term by term. So we are a team of 15 students in the family team, and I will coordinate who's working what shift and making sure it works with their academic timetable so there's no clashes. And then that hopefully avoids people not being able to make shifts, people having to do shift swaps. If there is people that need to shift swap, I'm the first port of call before it goes on to the coordinators at NCLF, again, taking that burden off them, having to try and run around and find someone to cover that shift. Similarly, I also arrange and put in place all the dates and times for the training sessions to make sure as many of our students can attend as possible. My time volunteering at NCLS has been nothing but rewarding. It's great talking point in applications and interviews, of course. It's given me that unique on-the-job experience. I've built up so many skills. I'm watching solicitors interacting with clients, seeing the way they conduct themselves. But on the back of that, I also get to see the importance of social welfare law and why communities need charities like NCLS. Overall, I'm so grateful for the experience that NCLS's partnership with UEA has given me, and I absolutely will carry everything I've learned through into my employment. and have every intention of carry on with pro bono work. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Megan. It was really great to hear from you and learn about your experience. Now we're going to turn to Bill Scarrow, the Director of Pro Bono Community, and Juliana Ajabade, who is the Operations Manager. They'll tell us a bit about their training and volunteer program, as well as their learning so far regarding what has worked in terms of developing and sustaining successful student pro bono placements.
Hope everyone can see that. Yeah, my name's Bill Scarrow. I'm the Director of Pro Bono Community, and my colleague Juliana Ajabade is our Operations Manager. I'm just going to briefly outline what it is we do, because I think everybody else here is better placed to discuss in the question and answer session what the constraints are and what resources are required. Pro Bono Community was set up by two young lawyers. They were fresh out of law school, actually, when they set the charity up back in 2013, 2014. We have a very niche mission, that is to train lawyers and students in legal advice and social welfare law, and then organise placements for them to work as volunteers at advice agencies. Initially, we worked mainly with law firms, but the pendulum has rather moved the other way, and we work more with universities than law firms at the moment. I don't need to tell everyone here about the need. The pandemic and now the energy and cost of living crises have led to an increased demand for legal advice. Funding cuts have reduced the capacity to meet that demand. One of the ways of addressing this deficit in access to justice is to provide advice agencies with well-trained and highly motivated volunteers. Lawyers can help to meet that demand through pro bono work, but of course they do have day jobs. Students therefore can provide a vital source of volunteers, and right now Pro Bono Community has the best part of 200 students that we've trained towards the end of last year and are now working as volunteers in advice agencies, many of whom are here today, across the country. So our service model, well, we've worked with many universities, including the University of Law. This work, it's channeled either through credit-bearing modules, such as those we deliver to both the LLB and the LLM students at City University, or through a range of extracurricular programs, such as those we've recently run for LSE, UCL, SOAS, and others. PBC appreciates its partners and clients have different needs and is able to tailor its offering to individual requirements and budgets. We're also involved in special advice projects which use student volunteers, including one we run in partnership with Citizens Advice Haringey, funded by the National Lottery Community Fund, which, as it happens, we're currently recruiting for that programme for a new batch of volunteers from the University of Law. We also run our own digital advice clinic, which launched very recently, specialising in welfare benefits appeals, and we anticipate recruiting for that in the near future. The training we provide before placing student volunteers almost always has a core element which provides an introduction to legal advice and the practical skills associated with it. The training then focuses on one or more areas of social welfare law, with the most common being welfare benefits and housing law. And we receive well over 90% positive feedback for our training. The training is merely a means to an end, and that is to place students at advice agencies all over the country so they can help deliver more and better quality access to justice. It's important to note that a good level of commitment is required by advice agencies, and that, I think, is one of the main constraints in terms of the resources and what the universities can bring to bear on this issue is to work with us as Pro Bono Community, as the mediator of these placements, to make sure the students are very aware of what the commitment is that's required. And of course, the longer the volunteers stay, it's important to make them understand the richer their experience will be and the more responsibility that they'll be given. When they work well, our training and volunteer placement programs are a win-win for all concerned. From students' perspective, they gain training in areas of law that are not normally part of the legal curriculum, and practical experience of the law where they'll be dealing with real people who have real problems. This experience will, of course, as the previous speaker has just said, will be relevant to future employers, whilst at the same time the volunteers will be helping to deliver increased access to justice and making a positive difference to people's lives. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bill. I really appreciate that presentation. It was helpful to hear what you guys have been doing. And finally, we're going to move on to our last presenters, excuse me, from the Access to Justice Foundation. So we're going to hear from Shabana Aslam and Tia Booth Roberts from the Access to Justice Foundation. Shabana is our grants manager and will be giving us an overview of pro bono cost orders. Tia is our senior grants officer and will be providing some examples of the impact of the funding on grantee organizations.
Hi everyone, I am really conscious of time, so I'm going to be super quick and can assure you that information will be shared with attendees. So I am the grants manager, and I just wanted to really quickly talk a little bit about pro bono cost orders and how actually they support some of our funding programs within the Access to Justice Foundation. So pro bono costs, as many of you I'm sure will know, are just like ordinary legal costs. Are obviously available where a party receives free of charge legal representation provided by a solicitor, barrister or advocate in England, Wales, Scotland or Northern Ireland. So if a civil case is won with pro bono help, there are pro bono costs that can be ordered, of course, by the civil court tribunal or included in settlements. So I wanted to clarify that pro bono costs cover any period where free of charge representation was provided, even if part of that representation is paid for and part is free of charge. You can still claim a pro bono cost order. So really it's just a call out to ask for help. So as an organisation, we're always really keen to have contact with barristers, solicitors or law firms so that we can share this information. We really need you to be advocates because ultimately what this does is help us to secure funding and investment to continue the pro bono provision. And I can tell you that last year alone, we distributed just over £300,000 in grants from the awards that we received in pro bono cost orders. So we're always looking to increase that amount that we can ultimately give back to organisations. And I'm going to pass really quickly over to Tia, who's just going to give you an example of how some of that funding has been used.
So as Shabana said, it's this funding is so vital, and this work very much needs funding. And the reason why we at the Access to Justice Foundation fund these projects is because we are really keen to support access to free specialist legal advice, and obviously pro bono projects fall directly into this category. What we're hearing from grantees is that pro bono projects are typically additional things along with their general service. And we hear from when we open our grant rounds that this sort of stuff there isn't enough funding out there to fund this work. And we know that it's so very vital. And with funds that we've raised through what Shabana outlined, we've been able to put that money straight back into pro bono projects. And in 2022, we managed 2 different pro bono grant rounds. The first was 2 organisations that were national organisations who looked to fund their current provision and to expand it across regions, meaning that we were able to improve provision for pro bono advice across the whole of England and Wales and the UK. And secondly, we have also funded 9 organisations as part of regional pro bono funding. And these projects were a mixture of those that were already well established and wanting to grow their provision, as well as smaller organisations that were either starting out and wanting to provide pro bono services, or ones that were re-establishing something after the pandemic, because we know that this is still very much important. But one of the most important things for us is trying to make the case for further funding. And by doing that, we were really interested on the impact to clients. Megan already touched on this, but the cost of living crisis is impacting services everywhere, and anything that a pro bono service can provide is better than nothing. And anecdotally, we know the impact to clients is profound. We know that when a client comes in for free legal advice and they get to speak to a pro bono volunteer, they feel completely listened to. It improves their confidence. The level of respect that they have for legal professionals, because they know that they are given a very small amount of time to speak to this legal professional, is really, really important. And it's not necessarily always about the positive impact. You know, speaking to a legal professional might be great because they might be more likely to have a positive outcome on their case. But at the same time, having advice from a legal professional about the merits of their case, you know, if they're told that maybe their case wouldn't succeed, this is great because it also means that it takes that case out of the court system. And then in turn, although it might be disappointing to the client in the very beginning, this is likely to cause them less mental anguish and improve their mental health so that they're not having to go through that court system. And Tim and Shabana have already touched on this, but there just isn't enough funding for this provision. And one of the things that we find really difficult when we're speaking to grantees is how to get that impact from clients, because organizations don't have that direct relationship with the client. It's actually a pro bono volunteer. So something to bear in mind if any organizations are currently running a pro bono provision or are going to have volunteers, student volunteers in, it's how important it is to measure that impact to clients. It's very much part of your role also to ensure that you're able to add on to the kind of impact so that organizations can make funding applications for this work, which we know is so very vital. And that's me. Please feel free to put any questions for me or Shabana in the chat if you don't have any more questions relating to either pro bono cost orders or any of the grants that we've given out to pro bono projects.
Thank you so much, Tia and Shabana. I'm cognizant that we are rapidly reaching the end of our session. So very quickly before we start to do some questions and answers in the time remaining, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to all of our amazing contributors today. And thanks for taking the time to share your learnings and your experience with the rest of the community. We're going to be sure to follow up with your learnings when we do our follow-up work. At the minute, this is a one-off event, but we'll be asking everyone to share their feedback via a survey in due course. And if you think, based on today, that there's anything we could be doing to support learning and experience sharing on this topic on an ongoing basis, please do let us know, and we'll be looking to progress this, and we can have future conversations and future sessions as well if people think that there's interest in that. So I guess now I'll just open the floor in the last few minutes to anybody who has any questions. If you could please utilize the hand raise function or pop questions in the chat. I've seen that it's been quite busy in the chat so far, but this would be a good time to ask those. Fiona McKee?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask the guys from Access to Justice if they could share a little bit about the funding that was granted to two different groups in Northern Ireland there. It was last year or the year before. I'm not sure, we haven't really, as a network organisation, we haven't learned anything of those projects or what their remit is to cover or how we can access, or if it's relevant for us to be able to access the services that they're providing. Just if there was something that could be shared around that, would be really helpful.
Hi, Fiona. So I'm just conscious of the time. We've only got a couple of minutes left. So what it might be useful to do is to connect outside of this meeting. So what I'll do is I'll get your email and I can have a look at the funding. So I'm quite new to the foundation, so I'll just want to take that away. And perhaps we can pick up that conversation outside. Is that okay?
That would be perfect. Thank you so much. I'll just send you my email address now.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Thanks, Fiona.
Thanks for that. Glory, Joseph.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. So I'm a student volunteer with the BC Law Clinic, Immigration Law team. So I wanted to ask, my program comes with a placement. So I want to know if any organization here, you need to take up a student on student placements, basically on immigration law or asylum law. That's my question. Thank you.
I'm not sure who would best be suited. If you wanted to pop your question in the chat as well, Glory, then we might be able to have someone send out a message for that as well. I don't know if anybody off the bat had an answer to that. I see, yes, the recording will be sent out. So everyone will be circulated this as well as what we've been chatting about in the chat function. Mel, if we want to take, I guess, one more question. Gloria, you can maybe put your question in the chat. Yeah, beautiful. And then Mel, if we can take your question, then I'm cognizant that we're about to run out of time. So hopefully that will wrap it up.
Okay. Hi, can you hear me? Great. That was really helpful. I was particularly concerned, we're a law centre, and I'm sure there are a lot of other voluntary sector, not-for-profit sector agencies in attendance here. And we do, I mean, you basically have to be prepared to muck in and do everything. It isn't all shiny stuff, going to court and, winning cases. It's about just the real sort of day-to-day stuff that we need a lot of help with. Some of it is administrative, some of it is, answering a telephone, some of it is being prepared to do meet and greet at the front door. And I mean, I'm not quite sure whether or not, in terms of the agencies that are here that do student volunteering and coordinate, maybe give students an idea that it's about being willing to muck in. And I think as we as an agency become more confident in their abilities, we see them at work, then we're more likely to give them more responsibility in terms of maybe seeing clients, sitting in on client interviews and that sort of thing. But we're really interested in having student volunteers because there's a massive need just to support us in our work. So yeah, is there anyone that might be able to deal with that?
Emmeline, I think that's probably me. I've got the lion's share of the students here, unless there's anybody else I haven't seen in the delegate list. Students, I think, are appreciative of any opportunities they get to leave the campus in the nicest possible way, and it really doesn't matter quite what experience they get, because they will learn an immense amount from just walking through your front door. Relationships develop over time, and your confidence in the student's abilities obviously will have to be assessed in the first instance, and will obviously grow over the course of time. I think one of the important points is that when you have a relationship with a student, it's an opportunity for a relationship for life, effectively. These students are very faithful. I get countless examples of students who have started and then 25 years later they're still involved. Maybe they've taken breaks for having children, or the careers have got particularly difficult for whatever it may be, but they can become quite sticky, and as they become more senior, their networks grow, their influence, they can move on to governance and trusteeship roles rather than casework. So I think it's, don't underestimate the value of day-to-day, both to the student themselves and to the organisation, because it's an investment for the future.
Thanks. I'm definitely going to be in touch with you after this, Tim.
I'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
Can I just add to that very briefly, Tim, because obviously we work very closely with all the students that we place, and we go, I mentioned the issue of commitment and students understanding the nature of the commitment that they have to make before they apply to join programs such as the ones we run. So we go to some length to explain to the students in advance, before they've even applied to join a scheme, what is expected of them, what the commitment involves, and as Mel has just outlined, that the placements will involve a range of activities, some of which are relatively mundane, but that the longer they stay and the more confidence they gain, the more likely they are to be involved in the kind of activities that they really want to be, which is essentially kind of direct contact, face-to-face contact with clients, and that kind of thing. So that's what we very much feel is part of our role as a facilitator of placements, is to do everything we can to make sure the students know what they're going to get out of placements and what is expected of them.
Yeah, so it's a really good point, and I don't think you can escape the fact that when you have very young and inexperienced students, perhaps their discipline and their dedication is not going to be quite what it would be when they're 3, 4, 5 years older. I think it's horses for courses. And when you do take somebody on, I think it's important to have a conversation about what level of student you're taking on and what your realistic expectations are. But certainly University of Law impresses on the students the importance of turning up, being consistent, being reliable, because there's really absolutely no point. It's worse than not having them at all if they turn up and then they just as somebody said to me the other day, put lip gloss on. Which actually happened. Very rare, but it does happen, and we're extremely keen to get feedback on the students, not only to find out the quality of their experience, but also to find out the quality of the support that you've had from them.
I hate to jump in here, but I'm aware that we're over on our time limit. So I just again wanted to thank everybody for attending. It does seem we have had a wealth of knowledge here and lots of questions. So it seems like there's going to be some interest going forward. Please do not hesitate to reach out to myself or to Tim if you have questions. As I said, look out for the survey that we'll be sending around in terms of future interests that we might have in continuing this as more of a series. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your week, and please do reach out with anything that you need. So thank you so much for taking the time this morning.
Right, thanks very much everybody for coming, and goodbye. I've been peppering the chat with my contact details and my direct messages. So if you do want to speak to me about any aspect of student volunteering or any other partnership work that you may have a need for and you think students can help, please do get in contact with me.